So tonight we'll be talking about the real root of unhappy marriages and divorce. We usually say that the subject tonight, the topic, if you don't apply anything else you learn in the course except this, only this will already single-handedly change your marriage. And if not resolve all your problems, it will make it completely different than what it is right now. That's how powerful this subject is. So please pay close attention to this. Have you ever heard somebody say, or maybe you read this somewhere, God hates divorce? Have you? Who's never heard that? You never heard that? You haven't? No, you haven't? Okay. That's in the Bible. God hates divorce. Okay? And we better pay attention because the Bible doesn't say God hates very often. Okay? So when he says God hates something, you pay attention because it's something very important. So God hates divorce because, of course, divorce is the desecration of what he created, which is marriage. Divorce is basically proving that it is as if God was wrong in creating marriage. He wasn't. But it is as if God was wrong and marriage is wrong, marriage doesn't work. Like a lot of people seem to be repeating this nowadays. So God does hate divorce. But the interesting thing is that you'd imagine, okay, if God hates something, if he hates it, and he is God, he's so powerful, why doesn't he stop it? Is there anything impossible for God? Anything too hard for God? God can do all things. You believe that? Yes, he can do all things. Nothing is impossible or too hard for God. And yet, God cannot stop divorce. Why can't he stop divorce, though he hates it? And this is what we'll be looking into here. A force that is so powerful, something that is so strong that even God cannot stop it. So what is that? We will talk about this tonight. There are actually two reasons that we will learn tonight. Two reasons why God cannot stop divorce. Okay? So we'll look at them in turn. In order to understand that, let's read a scripture from the Bible in Matthew 19, when Jesus was actually asked about the question of divorce. Some religious people came to him and asked him a question. Let's read that on the screen. One day the Pharisees were badgering him. Is it legal for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? And Jesus answered, haven't you read in your Bible that the Creator originally made man and woman for each other, male and female? And because of this, a man leaves father and mother and is firmly bonded to his wife, becoming one flesh. No longer two bodies, but one. Okay, so the first half of Jesus' answer, the question was, is it legal for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? So Jesus explains that originally God made man and woman, and he determined that in marriage a man would leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. They would be firmly bonded. The word firmly bonded in the original language in the Bible means glued together. If you can imagine two sheets of paper glued together, to the extent that if you take them apart, they are not like they were before anymore, right? They are ruined. So that's what he meant. They are going to be so bonded together. They will be so united that they will not be individuals anymore. They will become one. Right? The two will become one. Like if you take two potatoes and mash them, you make mashed potatoes. That's exactly what God meant with marriage. Two separate potatoes, you cook them, you mash them, the result is mashed potato. You don't have two potatoes anymore. And neither can you have two potatoes ever again. Right? You can't separate the mashed potato and make two potatoes again. Once they are mashed together, they're one. And they are mashed potatoes. So that's the idea of marriage, the way God created marriage. A man will leave his father and mother, and so will the wife leave her parents, and they will both be bonded together like one. So here's reason number one why divorce occurs. Because this never happened in the marriage. They did not become one flesh. So there wasn't a bonding, a blending of the two into one. They just remained two individuals. Just two individuals together. They did not become one. And if they did not become one, so the bond that is between them is very fragile. Right? If you have two separate items, it's very easy to separate them. If you have one, it's very hard to break them. So this is why divorce happens, because people who get married, when people get married, do not become one flesh. So when the problems come between them, it's easy for them to just break apart. They never became one. All right? So this idea of being glued together is one of the main ideas in marriage. That you are no longer two individuals, you are one. How does that happen? You becoming one. We'll be understanding more how this happens as we go along on this topic. But I see that one of the biggest mistakes couples make when they get married is that they fight very hard to remain individuals rather than blending together as one family. And because they do that, things can get in between them very easily. Things and people. So we have, for example, one of the main problems we see that affects divorce is when children are born in marriage. Until the children are born, they may have had an okay marriage, a good marriage, and then the children come along, and now, if they aren't one together, the attention will be divided between the spouse and the children. Usually, because the mother is more attached to the children, she will give a lot of attention to her children or to her child, and the husband will feel kind of left out. Typically, I'm not saying this always happens, but typically this happens. And this is one of the reasons why couples start having problems. Because when their relationship is not already solid, they are not one, and then something else comes in between, and it doesn't have to be something evil. It can be something as innocent as a baby. Something comes in between, then that bond is not there. They can start having problems because it starts to separate them. Now, it can be a baby. It can be the mother-in-law or your own relatives, your mom, your dad, your sister. It can be a friend, a relative that you're trying to put up. They have a problem and he moved in because you want to help, and your spouse feels that you are putting that person first than he or her. It can be an addiction that is getting between the two of you. Your spouse feels that your substance, whatever it is that the object of your addiction, has become more important to you than her or than him. Because your money goes to that, your time, your attention, and even though you know that is hurting your spouse, you don't do anything about it. So that is driving a wedge between you. It can be friends. Maybe you have friends from when you were single, And now that you're married, you don't want to leave those friends. You still want to do the same things you did with those friends, but not include your spouse. So friends can be there in the middle. Work can be there, right? You're very success-driven. Maybe you are a workaholic and you want to work. You work very hard, and you sacrifice time with your family because of work. So, as I'm saying, I'm just giving examples. It can be anything that, good or bad, that can enter between the couple and just separate them when they are not one flesh. When you allow that to happen, you are setting up the stage for a divorce. It may take years, but you are setting up that stage. I see how the priorities get wrong and the understanding of this gets wrong in many couples when I look at how sometimes the mother or the father will fight and do anything for their child so the child can be okay or protected from trouble, etc., but will not even do half the effort for the marriage or for the spouse. For example, I know, I'm just generalizing, in some cases, the only thing that a parent can do to protect a child is to separate. When one of the spouses becomes abusive, for example, or is engaging in behavior that is just hurtful to the children, the responsibility lies on this one parent to just protect the children from the abusive parent. I know, there are cases like that. But sometimes because the spouse is not getting the affection from their partner, that affection is transferred onto the children. And it kind of makes sense, but in the end it doesn't. Because if you really want to help your children, if you really want to establish your children to do well by them, the first thing you should start working on is your marriage. Because your children need a stable home, an example to look up to, so they can grow up and be better individuals, right? I'm not saying that if they grow up in a divorced home, they will be bad people, but I'm saying there's no question about the stability that a good marriage provides to children. So you should start there. But I see that people go through lengths to protect their children, to keep the custody of kids. For example, in the event of a divorce, they go to court, they go to extraordinary lengths just to keep their children close to them. And yet, our children are not one flesh with us. They came out of us. They are our flesh and blood in the sense that they came out of us. But our responsibility towards them is to provide them what they need, raise them up, and try to prepare them for their own life. And eventually they will what? Move on. Move out of the nest. Right? And we will be what? Alone. I don't think you expect your children to be with you forever in the house, taking care of you. So, if you fight so hard to give your children the best, but your children are not even your flesh, they are not going to stay with you, they will move on and have their own life. Why don't you do the same or more for your own flesh? For the person that is supposed to be your own flesh. So the priorities get mixed up there. They get mixed up because people fail to understand this concept, how God established the priorities in marriage. To go further into this, let me illustrate this. If you look at the screen, we have what we call a family of origin. That means where you were born. Your family of origin is your father, mother, brothers and sisters if you had any. So that's your cell where you were born. So that's our family of origin. Then what happens to you in due course? You move out of the nest, and what I was just saying here now happens to your parents. You leave them, right? As Jesus said, leave father and mother. So you leave your parents. So this will happen to you if you have children, eventually your children will move out and you will be just the two of you alone, or if you don't have that your partner anymore, it will be you alone. And it will be a pretty sad situation. So, you moved out of your parents' house, and then you started what? A new family, a new cell. You started a new family. So now, husband, wife, and if you have any children, you have a new family, a new unit together. So now this new family is your family. When you say my family, you are referring to husband, wife, and your kids. Your family of origin are now your relatives. They are your relatives. They are no longer a part of your immediate family. They are your relatives. So they come after your immediate family. That's the way that God originally designed it. So this red line, you see this dotted line in the middle, means you don't see this line, of course, but there is a line that separates your family, your immediate family, from the extended family, the family of origin, the relatives. Your family has to come first. Your family has to come first. Your spouse has to come before your mother. Your husband has to come before your sister, before your father, before anybody else outside your family unit. So here is, connected to this thought, is the other reason why divorce happens. The spouse comes first. That's how God designed it. Your spouse has to come first, even before your children, for the reasons I already explained. So, everything in life requires priorities, requires order. If you look at the world around you, you will see that the world only works because of order, of discipline, and priorities being enforced. When you're driving, you have to make way. You have to yield to others, right? In your workplace, you have to follow certain order. Somebody has to get their job done so you can then get started on yours. So life requires order. The body requires discipline. If you're going to put on your clothes, you need to start with your underwear. You're going to look really ridiculous if you put on your pants and then your underwear, right? Everything requires order in life for it to work. We take this for granted. God also has established an order of relationships in families. For the marriage to work, there has to be a certain order, a priority to be followed. And the first one in this order of priority is God. I'm going to talk to you about three. So the first one that God established in the order of relationships is Himself. And why is it important that God be at the top there? Not just because He's God or because you're supposed to be a Christian or whatever it is, but God is the perfect marriage ref. When you have relationships between two or more people, you're bound to have problems, right? Why do we have laws? Why do we have courts? Why do sports games need to have a ref? Because somebody is going to have a problem with what somebody else is doing. And then who is going to be right and who's going to have this or that way? It will either come down to, a fight of fists, right? Whoever is strongest, or they will both, these two people, or this group of people, will have to subscribe to agreed laws. So the law will decide for them. The ref will decide for them. You have a dispute with somebody else, you both go to court, and the judge will decide. Whether you like the outcome or not, the law is the law. You got to follow it. So you've got somebody that you answer to. In a marriage, many couples have problems, especially couples who don't have this relationship with God. They have problems. Why? Because they get inside a circle or a cycle of he's right, she's right. They get into this cycle like this. And they never end, they never come to any agreement because they think, well, but I have a point. You're not understanding my point. No, but you're not understanding my point. So they keep debating, and they never agree. Why? Because they don't answer to anybody higher. There's no ref in this marriage. So this will probably not be settled, will never be settled. You know, you don't really want to marry someone, to be married to somebody who is not accountable to anybody. It's a dangerous thing for you to be married to someone and you or that person don't feel accountable to anybody. Because if you don't feel you answer to anybody, oh, you are your own God, right? You make your rules. What you feel, what you want, what you like goes. And if your partner doesn't like it, too bad. So see how the problems begin when you don't have someone you answer to, someone higher. That's why God has established in the order of relationships that he should be the first one. In other words, husband and wife should subscribe to God's way of doing things. Okay, we are having a problem over the discipline of the children. We are having a problem over the use of money in the marriage. We are having a problem over you befriending somebody of the opposite sex. What does God say about that? So if you both have that in your minds, then quickly it will not be your way or her way, his way or your way. It will be God's way. And then the disputes are settled. If my marriage is going into 20 years now, it's not because I'm a good man, a good husband, or my wife a great woman, a great wife. Although today we are much better than we were. But it's because we both subscribe to God first. That's why. So that's the one of the number one reasons. You, husband, you don't want your wife not to be answerable to someone higher. In this case, God. Because if that's the case with her, she will always feel like you are oppressing her, like you're trying to boss her around. She will not understand her role as a wife or your role as a husband. So it's in your interest as a man, as a husband, that your wife seek God. You wife, you don't want a husband who doesn't answer to anybody unless you want a dictator. So it's in your interest to encourage your husband to have a relationship with God. That's my advice. What you make of it is your decision. So, number 2, after God is your spouse, as we've already said. Number 2, meaning the first person in your life after God is your spouse. No exceptions, no ifs nor buts. That's the way marriage is supposed to work. If you put anything else before your spouse, you're going to have problems. And it's not just your spouse who will complain. If your spouse does it to you, you will have problems with your spouse too. Because nobody wants to get married to be second or third or be an option. You get married because you want to be the number one person in that person's life. You want to be special. Right? Otherwise you don't get married. So you want it done to you, you've got to do it for your spouse too. So this takes sacrifices. This looks beautiful in theory. In practice, this is much harder, and it means that you will have to put some people to the side. You will have to put some people third, fourth, second, and your spouse will have to come first. You have to change certain things that you do about your life. I had a problem with my wife in the beginning of our marriage when I had grown up being very friendly with women. I have a sister. I have lots of female cousins. In school, I always had friends, female friends. When I got married, I never saw any problem with having female friends. My wife did. And she felt bad that sometimes I was giving, at least in her eyes, too much attention to women, to other women. I never cheated on her. I never had an affair with another woman. I was just doing what I had always done as a single man. For her, that was uncomfortable. That made her feel uncomfortable. Coupled with the fact that I wasn't giving her much attention because I was burying my head in my work. So you add these two things. The imaginations, when you don't give attention, when you don't give the information to your spouse will normally fill in the blanks, and the information will normally be negative. So she started having these problems. And at first, I tried to use the card, that blanket excuse that we normally use in marriage, which says, well, but that's me, that's the way I am, and you're trying to change me. It's not my problem, you found me this way. And I tried to tell her that. It is your problem. You are imagining things. You are trying to control me, etc. So we had problems because I didn't see how my being myself was interfering in our marriage. So I had to adjust and understand that really there is a problem. If my wife has a problem with it, then I have a problem with it because we are one. Right? If my foot is hurting, there's no point my head pretend it's not. Right? If we are one body, one flesh, and my foot hurts, my head, if it's smart, will start looking why it's hurting, and will try to heal it. And if I'm a smart head, a smart husband, I will try and look for the reason and try to deal with it, rather than bury my head and forget or pretend that it's not, or say to my foot, well, too bad for you that you stepped on a nail. Now you're hurting. That serves you well. Right? Too bad. I would be crazy to do that. But if you are one, if you have the understanding that you are one flesh, so there's no such thing as pushing your wife to the side and saying, you are the problem. Oh, this is you. This is your problem. No, that's when you see yourselves as two individuals, not as one. If you see yourselves as one, so your spouse has a problem, then you have a problem. And you try to work and help your spouse to deal with that and overcome that problem. But shoving the problem to him or her will not solve anything. So I had to adjust. I had to make sure that my wife felt that she was first in my life. I had to show it with actions and not pay lip service to it. So it takes work to really apply this order of relationships in our marriage. And then after this, if you get this one right, these two priorities right in your life, everything else will be much easier, like your children, etc.